My name is Archivist Telvar, and for most of my career I believed history had already recorded the worst mistake our species had ever made. I was wrong. That title now belongs to a decision made 43 standard cycles ago in a room filled with the most intelligent minds of the Velnath Dominion. A decision I witnessed. A decision I tried to stop. And a decision that very nearly destroyed us all. You see, we believed something about humans. Something almost every advanced species in the galaxy believes the first time they encounter them. We believed they were fragile. From an evolutionary perspective, the conclusion seemed obvious. Humans lack natural armor. Their claws are dull. Their teeth are unimpressive. Their senses are mediocre compared to most predatory species. Even their homeworld is considered unusually dangerous. Violent weather systems. Seismic instability. Thousands of competing life forms constantly evolving to kill, poison, infect, or consume each other. Most intelligent civilizations emerge on relatively stable worlds where cooperation develops gradually over millennia. Earth is not one of those places. Yet when humanity finally joined the interstellar community, our analysts dismissed them as a minor curiosity. Interesting perhaps, but hardly significant. Their technology was respectable but not exceptional. Their military forces were modest compared to galactic standards. And their political structure was chaotic. Multiple governments. Constant disagreements. Endless debates. To our strategic planners, it looked like a species that had barely managed to organize itself. Which is why the Velnath High Command believed humans would make the perfect test subject. At the time, our military had just finished developing what our scientists confidently described as the most sophisticated biological weapon ever engineered. The Cascade virus. It was designed to solve a problem that had frustrated military planners for centuries. Most biological weapons fail for one simple reason. Once a species begins developing immunity, the pathogen loses effectiveness. The Cascade virus eliminated that weakness. Every 6 hours it rewrote its own genetic structure. Every 12 hours it produced a new infection pathway. And every 24 hours it evolved entirely new transmission methods. In theory, it was impossible for any immune system to adapt fast enough to survive it. Our simulations predicted total biological collapse in less than 30 days. When the High Council selected humanity as the testing target, the decision seemed logical. They were numerous enough to produce meaningful data, technologically advanced enough to monitor, but politically fragmented enough that retaliation was unlikely. At least, that was the reasoning presented to the Council. I remember the day the proposal was approved. I was standing in the observation chamber behind the strategic advisors, reviewing the biological projections. Even then, something about the plan made me uneasy. Not because I doubted the virus. The science was sound. But because our data on humans was incomplete. We knew their technology. We knew their military capacity. We knew their population distribution. What we did not fully understand was their biology. And when I raised that concern during the council briefing, Commander Kellix simply laughed. I can still hear his voice clearly. Archivist Telvar, he said, you worry too much. He gestured toward the holographic image of Earth slowly rotating above the council table. A small blue world. Fragile looking. Peaceful. Humans are simply another young species trying to survive in a dangerous universe. The other commanders nodded in agreement. None of them realized the truth. None of them understood the one critical detail our research had overlooked. Humans were not merely a species surviving on a dangerous world. They were a species built by it. And in less than 30 days, the entire galaxy was going to learn what that really meant. The decision to deploy the Cascade virus was not made in secrecy. In fact, it was announced with considerable pride. The Velnath Strategic Council chamber was designed to impress. A circular hull carved from obsidian black alloy, large enough to hold 300 commanders, scientists, and advisors. At its center floated a massive holographic projection of the Milky Way, each star system marked by shifting streams of data. When I entered the chamber that morning, the atmosphere was almost celebratory. Engineers were discussing mutation pathways. Military officers were reviewing planetary population statistics. Several of the Dominion's leading biologists stood near the central display, admiring the elegant complexity of the virus they had spent nearly a decade creating. Commander Kellex stood at the head of the council table, towering over the room with the quiet confidence of someone who believed history was about to remember his name. "The Cascade virus represents the future of warfare," he announced. With a gesture of his claw, the hologram shifted. The galaxy faded away, replaced by a microscopic view of a twisting strand of alien genetic code. "This pathogen," Kellex continued, "was engineered to solve the greatest limitation of biological weapons, adaptation." He expanded the display. The genetic strand split apart, rearranged itself, and reassembled in an entirely new configuration. Every 6 hours, the virus rewrites its own structure. Another transformation. And every mutation improves its ability to bypass immune defenses. One of the council scientists leaned forward eagerly. "The human immune system will attempt to identify the pathogen," she explained to the room. "But by the time their antibodies adapt, the virus will already have changed." Several commanders nodded approvingly. "To put it simply," Kellex said, his voice filled with satisfaction, "humans will be fighting a different disease every few hours." Laughter rippled around the chamber. One of the military strategists spoke up. "And their medical systems?" "Overwhelmed within days," replied the chief epidemiologist. "Human hospitals rely on targeted treatments. But the Cascade virus will mutate faster than their doctors can identify it." Another officer leaned back in his seat. "How long until complete biological collapse?" The epidemiologist activated a series of projection charts. Population graphs appeared above the table. "Initial outbreak will cause confusion," she explained. "But by day 5, infection rates will accelerate exponentially." She tapped the display. The red line representing human population began dropping rapidly. Day 7, global panic. Another drop. Day 10, medical infrastructure failure. The line plunged sharply. Day 20, total extinction threshold. A satisfied murmur spread across the council chamber. Even the more cautious members seemed impressed. Commander Kellex folded his arms. "And that," he said, "is why humanity has been selected as the perfect testing environment." At that moment, I finally spoke. "Our intelligence files on human technology are extensive," I said. "But our biological studies are limited." The room grew quieter. "What exactly are you suggesting?" one of the scientists asked. I gestured toward the projected model of the virus. "You designed this pathogen based on standard immune response patterns across 47 known species." "That is correct," the epidemiologist replied. "But humans evolved on a world with unusually high pathogen diversity," I continued. "Their immune systems may behave differently." Kellex gave a dismissive flick of his claw. "All species believe their immune systems are unique." "Yes," I said. "But humans have survived thousands of natural pandemics." A strategist scoffed. "Every species faces disease." I activated a separate file from the historical archives. A list of human epidemics appeared in the air. Smallpox, influenza, Ebola, TB, SARS, COVID. Hundreds of viral threats documented across their recorded history. And those were only the ones humans had identified. They have endured centuries of biological warfare conducted by their own planet, I said quietly. The room fell silent for a moment. Then Commander Kellex laughed. A deep, confident sound that echoed across the chamber. "Archivist," he said, shaking his head, "you are overestimating them." He pointed toward the hologram of Earth rotating slowly above the table. "Humans are resilient, yes. But resilience does not equal superiority." He turned back to the council. "The Cascade virus mutates faster than any immune system can adapt. That is not speculation." He paused. "It is mathematics." Several scientists nodded in agreement. The vote to approve deployment was called moments later. The decision passed unanimously. And as the council chamber emptied that day, the commanders left with the quiet confidence of a civilization that believed it had just perfected the ultimate weapon. None of them realized they had also just made the single worst strategic mistake in Velnath history. Because somewhere on that small blue world, 8 billion humans were about to encounter a virus designed to outsmart evolution itself. And humanity has always been very good at solving impossible problems. The Cascade deployment fleet arrived in the Sol system 3 days later. Officially, the operation was classified as Observation Protocol 77B, a standard research mission designed to study developing civilizations from a safe distance. In reality, it was something far darker. I was assigned to the biological monitoring station aboard the Dominion vessel Velnath Ascendant, positioned just beyond the orbit of Mars. From there, we had a perfect vantage point to observe Earth without attracting attention. The planet filled half the observation window. Blue oceans, white clouds, bright clusters of artificial lights glowing across the night side. Even from orbit, human civilization looked alive. Busy, chaotic. Millions of aircraft crossing the skies. Ships moving across oceans. Cities pulsing with activity. It was difficult to imagine that within a few weeks, most of that activity would be gone. Commander Kellix entered the observation deck shortly before deployment. Behind him walked a small group of Dominion scientists and military analysts, all eager to witness what they believed would be the most successful biological test in Dominion history. Status report, Kellix ordered. A technician activated the planetary targeting display. Cascade delivery drones are in position, she replied. All vectors synchronized. The hologram zoomed in on Earth's surface. 7 glowing markers appeared across the continents. Each one represented a major human population center. New York, London, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, Lagos, Sydney. These cities were selected for optimal infection spread, the epidemiologist explained. High population density, international travel hubs, and diverse climates. She tapped the display. Once the virus begins spreading through these regions, global transmission will occur within 48 hours. Kellix nodded approvingly. And human detection? Unlikely during the initial stage, she replied. The first mutation cycle will mimic several known respiratory illnesses. Their doctors will misidentify it as seasonal influenza. The commander turned toward the main viewport. Earth rotated slowly beneath us. Peaceful, unaware. Begin deployment. The order echoed quietly across the command deck. Moments later, 7 small drones detached from the hull of the Velnath Ascendant. They were almost invisible against the darkness of space. Each one no larger than a human transport shuttle. Each one carrying billions of microscopic viral particles. The drones entered Earth's atmosphere one by one. From orbit, their descent looked like faint streaks of light. Human radar systems detected them briefly. Several air defense networks registered the objects as minor meteor fragments. None of the alerts lasted more than a few seconds. Exactly as planned. Within 20 minutes, all 7 drones had reached their release altitudes. The first viral dispersal occurred above New York City. I watched the sensor feed as a fine mist spread silently into the upper atmosphere. Invisible, odorless, deadly. Billions of Cascade virus particles began drifting downward toward the crowded streets below. The same event repeated across 6 other continents. London received its dispersal shortly after midnight local time. Tokyo during the early morning rush hour. Mumbai just before sunrise. Each city inhaled the virus without noticing. People went to work. Children went to school. Airports remained full. Hospitals operated normally. For the first 12 hours, nothing unusual happened. Then the first symptoms appeared. Mild fever. Fatigue. A persistent cough. Human doctors initially dismissed the illness as a seasonal infection. But the Cascade virus had already begun its first mutation cycle. 6 hours after entering the human body, it rewrote its own genetic structure. By the time doctors began studying the pathogen under microscopes, the virus they observed was no longer the one patients had originally inhaled. The disease accelerated quickly. Hospitals in New York reported hundreds of unexplained respiratory cases. London's emergency rooms began filling with patients suffering severe immune reactions. Tokyo's medical authorities issued a public health alert. Within 36 hours, the infection had spread far beyond the original cities. Commercial air travel carried the virus across continents. Cargo ships transported infected crews between ports. Tourists unknowingly spread the disease into dozens of new countries. Human governments scrambled to respond. Emergency broadcasts appeared across global media networks. Medical researchers began sequencing the virus genome. And that was when the first serious problem emerged. Vaccines proved impossible to develop. The cascade virus was working exactly as designed. By the end of the third day, the global infection count passed 10 million. And the virus had only just begun evolving. Commander Kellix watched the data streams with obvious satisfaction. "Our models were accurate," he said. The epidemiologist nodded. Human medical systems are already struggling to classify the pathogen. I studied the casualty projections scrolling across my monitor. Day 5, global infection saturation. Day 7, medical infrastructure collapse. Day 10, population decline accelerating. Day 20, biological extinction threshold. From a purely scientific perspective, the cascade virus was performing perfectly. But as I watched the numbers rise, I felt that same quiet unease returning. Because something about the infection data felt strange. At the time, I couldn't explain why. But within another week, the entire Dominion fleet would realize the truth. We had not unleashed the perfect weapon. We had accidentally started a war with the most adaptable immune system in the galaxy. The first week after deployment looked exactly like the Dominion's simulations predicted, which, at the time, made our commanders very confident. Human hospitals began reporting overwhelming patient numbers within 48 hours of the initial outbreaks. News broadcasts across Earth showed emergency rooms packed with coughing, feverish patients. Doctors worked through the night trying to understand the new disease. But every test result contradicted the last. In New York, the virus appeared to attack lung tissue aggressively. In London, it triggered catastrophic immune reactions. In Tokyo, patients experienced rapid organ failure. Human scientists quickly realized they were dealing with something far worse than a conventional pandemic. The pathogen was mutating. Constantly. Every time doctors sequenced the viral genome, it looked different. Every time they attempted treatment, the virus evolved around it. Antiviral drugs slowed the infection briefly before becoming useless. Experimental vaccines failed before clinical trials could even begin. Hospitals ran out of intensive care beds by the 5th day. Ambulances lined city streets. Medical workers collapsed from exhaustion. Across the planet, governments declared states of emergency. Air travel was suspended. Borders were closed. Entire cities entered lockdown. But the cascade virus had already spread too far. Millions of infected travelers had carried the disease across continents before the first quarantine orders were issued. And the virus did exactly what it had been designed to do. It changed. Every 6 hours, a new mutation. Every 12 hours, a new infection pathway. Within 1 week, the pathogen existed in dozens of variations across the human population. Some strains attacked respiratory systems. Others targeted blood chemistry. A few even interfered with neural signals, causing confusion and disorientation. Human doctors were no longer fighting one disease. They were fighting hundreds. From orbit, we watched the numbers climb. Day 5. Global infections, 120 million. Confirmed deaths, 2 million. Day 7. Hospitals in several countries began shutting down entirely. Medical staff were among the most heavily exposed groups, and many of them were becoming infected themselves. Global infections, 400 million. Confirmed deaths, 5 million. Day 10. Supply chains began collapsing. Factories closed as workers fell ill. Electric grids struggled to maintain stability in several major cities. Global infections, 800 million. Confirmed deaths, 12 million. Commander Kellix reviewed the projections with clear satisfaction. The virus is performing beyond expectations, he said during one of the Dominion Command briefings. A strategist standing beside him nodded. Human governments are losing control of the situation. The large holographic display above the council table showed a grim map of Earth. Red infection zones spread across every continent. Entire regions were now classified as high mortality zones. Day 14 projections? Kellix asked. The epidemiologist brought up the forecast chart. If current trends continue, we expect over 20 million deaths by the end of the second week. She paused. Human civilization will experience systemic collapse within 30 days. The council chamber responded with quiet approval. Several commanders began discussing the next stage of biological testing. Some proposed deploying additional viral variants to study long-term mutation behavior. Others suggested observing how quickly Earth's ecosystems would collapse without human management. From their perspective, the experiment was already a success. I remember standing near the rear of the chamber, watching the projections with growing discomfort. The numbers were staggering, yet something about the data still felt wrong. Not the infection rates. Those matched our models almost perfectly. It was something else. Something subtle buried inside the medical reports we were intercepting from Earth. While Dominion analysts focused on death statistics, I had been studying something slightly different. Recovery rates. At first, the numbers were almost non-existent. The cascade virus killed quickly once severe symptoms began. But around the 8th day, I noticed a handful of unusual reports. Patients who should have died didn't. A hospital in Chicago reported a man who recovered after entering respiratory failure. A clinic in Brazil documented a patient whose immune system appeared to stabilize unexpectedly. A laboratory in South Korea noted abnormal antibody behavior in several survivors. The numbers were tiny, statistically insignificant, but they were there, and they were increasing. At first, I assumed it was simply flawed medical data. Human hospitals were overwhelmed, and mistakes were inevitable during a crisis. But then another report arrived. Then another. And another. Each one describing a patient who had somehow survived a disease that should have been impossible to survive. I compiled the reports into a separate file. 23 cases. Then 31. Then 46. Each survivor shared a strange similarity. Their immune systems were producing something unusual. Something that our epidemiological models had not predicted. I remember staring at the data late one night on the monitoring station. Outside the observation window, Earth rotated slowly beneath us. A world in chaos. Cities locked down. Hospitals collapsing. Millions dying. And yet, somewhere on that planet, a small number of humans were beginning to do something extraordinary. They were learning how to fight the cascade virus. And they were doing it far faster than any immune system should have been able to adapt. At the time, I did not yet understand what that meant. But within a few days, the Dominion would realize the horrifying truth. Humanity was not collapsing. Humanity was learning. The Dominion command staff remained confident for nearly another week. From their perspective, the cascade virus was progressing exactly as predicted. Infection zones continued spreading across Earth, and the global death toll climbed steadily. Day 12. Confirmed deaths, 15 million. Day 3. Confirmed deaths, 18 million. The council analysts celebrated each report as proof that the weapon functioned perfectly. But while they focused on the rising death numbers, I was studying something else. The pattern beneath them. Late on the 13th day, I noticed the first statistical irregularity. It was small enough that most monitoring systems ignored it entirely. But it caught my attention immediately. The mortality curve had slowed. Not dramatically. Not enough to be obvious. But enough to disrupt the mathematical model we had used to predict the outbreak. I stared at the graph for several minutes. Then I recalculated the projections. The original curve predicted a steady exponential increase in deaths as the infection spread. Instead, the data showed something slightly different. The growth rate had begun flattening. At first, I assumed the anomaly was simply a reporting delay. Human governments were struggling to maintain accurate data collection during the crisis. But the pattern continued the following day. Day 14. Global infections passed 1 billion. Yet the daily death increase had stabilized. The curve was still rising, but it was rising more slowly. I brought the report to Commander Kellex during the morning briefing. This appears to be a statistical fluctuation, he said after glancing at the graph. Perhaps, I replied, but the pattern appears across multiple continents. I activated a secondary display. 3 separate infection regions appeared on the hologram. North America, East Asia, South America. Each region showed the same unexpected trend. Mortality acceleration was slowing. Kellex frowned slightly. That is unusual. Very, I said. The epidemiologist standing beside him leaned forward to examine the data. Could human quarantine measures be affecting transmission? She asked. I shook my head. Infection rates are still rising. Then perhaps they have discovered a treatment? Impossible, Kellex said immediately. The virus mutates too rapidly. I agreed with him. At least I thought I did. But the numbers continued bothering me. So I kept digging. Over the next several hours, I began reviewing thousands of intercepted medical reports from Earth. Human scientists had uploaded enormous amounts of research data to their global networks during the pandemic. Much of it was disorganized, incomplete, and written in dozens of languages. But buried inside those reports, I found something remarkable. Doctors were documenting an unusual phenomenon in a small number of recovered patients. The virus was not disappearing from their bodies. Their immune systems were learning to fight it. Normally, when an immune system encounters a virus, it produces specialized antibodies designed to attack that specific pathogen. But the cascade virus changed too quickly for standard immune responses to keep up. Our simulations had confirmed that. Yet in these recovered patients, the antibodies behaved differently. Instead of targeting one version of the virus, they attacked multiple mutations at once. At first, I thought the human doctors had made an error. But the more reports I read, the more consistent the pattern became. Recovered patients were producing what the human researchers called broad-spectrum antibodies. Antibodies capable of identifying structural similarities across multiple viral mutations. In other words, their immune systems were not trying to chase the virus as it changed. They were learning to recognize the parts of the virus that could not change. I remember feeling a sudden chill as I realized what that meant. The cascade virus had been designed to defeat conventional immune systems. But the human immune system was not responding conventionally. It was adapting. Not slowly over generations, the way evolution usually works, but within a single lifetime. And the number of recovered patients was increasing. I compiled a list of confirmed survivors. Dr. Marcus Williams, Chicago. Elena Rodriguez, Mexico City. David Park, Seoul. Rita Okonkwo, Lagos. James Thompson, London. 5 cases. Then 8. Then 15. Each one demonstrating the same unusual immune response. The pattern was still small. Statistically insignificant compared to the billions infected. But the trend was undeniable. Humans were beginning to survive the cascade virus. And if their immune systems continued adapting at this rate, then the Dominion had not created the perfect biological weapon. We had created the perfect training exercise for the most resilient immune system in the galaxy. At first, the Dominion scientists refused to believe the recovery reports. The cascade virus had been tested in simulations across dozens of biological models. No immune system had ever demonstrated the ability to track mutations that rapidly. But the data from Earth kept arriving, and the numbers kept growing. On day 15, the number of confirmed human recoveries passed 1,000. That number was still tiny compared to the billions infected, but it was increasing far faster than expected. I presented the updated report during the next command briefing. The survival rate is rising, I explained. Commander Kellex studied the chart with visible skepticism. Is this verified? Yes, I replied. Human laboratories across multiple countries are reporting the same antibody behavior. The epidemiologist beside him leaned forward. Show us the biological analysis. I activated the molecular model. A rotating hologram of the cascade virus appeared above the table. Around it floated dozens of slightly different viral structures, each representing a different mutation. This is the problem the virus creates, I explained. Every mutation alters its surface proteins. A conventional immune system identifies those proteins and produces antibodies to match them. I highlighted several points on the virus. But the cascade virus changes those proteins constantly. By the time antibodies form, the target has already changed. The scientists nodded. That was the entire point of the weapon. Then I switched the display, and they were doing it far faster than any immune system should have been able to adapt. At the time, I did not yet understand what that meant. But within a few days, the Dominion would realize the horrifying truth. Humanity was not collapsing. Humanity was learning. The Dominion Command staff remained confident for nearly another week. From their perspective, a new model appeared showing antibodies extracted from recovered human patients. These antibodies behave differently. The scientists leaned closer. Instead of targeting surface proteins, I continued, they appear to be attacking deeper structural components of the virus. One of the researchers frowned. Those structures are shared across mutations. Exactly, I said. The room went quiet. A strategist finally spoke. So their immune systems are skipping the mutation layer? That appears to be the case. The epidemiologist stared at the data. That shouldn't be possible, she whispered. Why not? I asked. Because immune systems normally evolve responses gradually. They need time to adapt. I nodded slowly. Yes. I pointed toward Earth's projection rotating above the table. But humans evolved on a planet where new pathogens appear constantly. Several scientists exchanged uneasy glances. One of them pulled up additional human biological records. What about historical pandemics? He asked. I had already studied them. Humans have survived hundreds, I replied. Smallpox, influenza, HIV, Ebola, SARS, COVID. Dozens of deadly viruses had swept across their world over the centuries, each one forcing their immune systems to adapt. The epidemiologist began scrolling through the data. Then she stopped suddenly. Wait. She zoomed in on a genetic diagram. Humans have something unusual in their DNA. What? Kelix asked. Ancient viral fragments. I nodded. About 8% of the human genome contains remnants of old viruses. The strategist frowned. That seems like a flaw. It might actually be an advantage, I said. Those fragments were the remains of infections their ancestors had survived long ago. Evidence that humanity's immune systems had been training against viral threats for millions of years. Which meant the cascade virus had not encountered an inexperienced immune system. It had encountered one that had spent its entire evolutionary history fighting exactly this kind of enemy. But the situation on Earth was changing even faster than we expected. Human scientists had begun noticing the same antibody pattern we had discovered, and they were sharing the information globally. Research laboratories across dozens of countries began working together to study the survivors. Blood samples were collected. Antibodies were isolated. Within days, doctors discovered something extraordinary. Those antibodies could be transferred. Recovered patients began donating plasma to hospitals. Doctors injected those antibodies into critically ill patients. And in many cases, the treatment worked. The cascade virus continued mutating. But the human immune response was evolving even faster. By day 17, thousands of patients had recovered. By day 19, the number reached 100,000. And the trend was accelerating. Human medical researchers were no longer simply reacting to the pandemic. They were learning from it, improving their treatments, sharing discoveries across global networks. Even as the virus mutated again and again, human science adapted alongside it. Commander Kelix studied the latest projections with growing concern. The death rate is slowing, he said quietly. The epidemiologist nodded. Human immune systems appear to be learning. I looked toward the observation window. Earth still showed signs of chaos. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Cities remained locked down. Millions were still dying. But something remarkable was happening beneath that crisis. Humanity was turning the Cascade virus into a teacher. And every day that passed, they were becoming better at defeating it. By the third week of the outbreak, something extraordinary began happening on Earth. Humanity stopped reacting to the virus and started outpacing it. At first, the change was subtle. Recovered patients continued increasing, but the real shift came from human laboratories. Scientists across the planet had begun coordinating their research through global networks. For the first time in the pandemic, human governments were not competing with one another. They were sharing everything: genetic data, treatment methods, patient records, even experimental results that normally would have remained classified. The crisis had forced their entire scientific community to unite. And when humans cooperate, their ability to solve problems accelerates dramatically. On day 21, a new report appeared in the monitoring feed. A laboratory in Germany had successfully isolated the most effective antibodies from recovered patients. Instead of simply transferring plasma from survivors, they had identified the precise immune cells responsible for producing the broad-spectrum antibodies. Human scientists began cloning those cells. Then they did something that surprised even our Dominion biologists. They improved them. Through a process humans called adaptive antibody therapy, researchers began modifying the antibodies to attack multiple viral structures simultaneously. The Cascade virus continued mutating, but the human countermeasure was now evolving faster than the virus itself. When I presented the data to Commander Kellex, the atmosphere in the command chamber had changed dramatically. The confident laughter from earlier briefings was gone. The Dominion scientists watched the reports with visible tension. "How widespread is this treatment?" Kellex asked. I activated the global distribution map. Hospitals across North America were already using it. Europe followed shortly after. Within 48 hours, medical facilities in Asia and South America began administering the therapy as well. Human manufacturing systems had been reconfigured to produce millions of doses. "They're scaling production globally," I said. The epidemiologist leaned closer to the display. "In 3 days?" she asked. "Yes." Several Dominion officers exchanged uneasy glances. Human infrastructure had been collapsing only a week earlier. Yet now their entire industrial network had reorganized to fight the virus. Factories that once produced consumer goods were manufacturing medical equipment. Airlines grounded by quarantine restrictions had converted their fleets into cargo transports for vaccines and plasma. Research universities had become emergency bioengineering centers. Every part of their civilization had shifted toward a single goal: stopping the Cascade virus. But the most remarkable change appeared in the infection statistics. Day 23. For the first time since the outbreak began, global death rates began falling. Not slowly, not gradually. They dropped sharply. Recovered patients now numbered in the tens of millions. Human immune systems were adapting faster than the virus could mutate. The Cascade virus continued producing new strains every 6 hours. But the human antibody therapies now neutralized most of them before they could cause severe damage. Commander Kellex stared at the data in disbelief. "That is not possible." I brought up the latest scientific report from Earth. Human researchers had discovered something else about the antibodies. Every time a patient recovered, their immune system improved the defense, which meant the next generation of antibodies was even more effective. The virus was mutating, but human immunity was evolving inside living bodies. I turned toward the observation window again. Earth looked the same from orbit. Blue oceans, white clouds, cities still glowing on the night side. But the planet below us was no longer helpless. It was fighting back. And humanity had begun turning the Cascade virus into something the Dominion had never intended: a training program. Every infected survivor produced stronger antibodies. Every recovery taught human doctors new strategies. Every failed mutation forced the virus into evolutionary corners. The Cascade virus had been designed to overwhelm human biology. Instead, it had triggered the most rapid biological adaptation our scientists had ever recorded. Within the Dominion fleet, the mood had shifted from confidence to concern. Strategic advisors began discussing containment options. Some suggested deploying additional viral variants to overwhelm the human response. Others proposed withdrawing the fleet before humans traced the attack. But one fact had become impossible to ignore. The Cascade virus was no longer winning. Humanity was. And with every passing day, the advantage was growing. Because humans had discovered something the Dominion never considered. If you survive a virus, you can learn how to defeat it. And humans were very good at learning. The Dominion command chamber had never been so quiet. 3 weeks earlier, the same room had been filled with confident predictions and scientific pride. The Cascade virus was supposed to be the ultimate biological weapon, perfectly engineered to outpace evolution itself. Now, the holographic display above the council table told a very different story. The infection map of Earth was still red across most continents. But the mortality projections had changed dramatically. Instead of continuing upward, the death curve had begun bending downward. Human recoveries were rising faster than new fatalities. And Dominion scientists were finally beginning to understand why. I had spent most of the previous night analyzing human biological records. Their researchers were publishing enormous amounts of data as they studied the virus, and the more I read, the more disturbing the pattern became. When the emergency council meeting began, I activated the central display. "Commander Calix," I said, "there is something you need to see." The hologram shifted. Instead of the virus model, a timeline of human history appeared above the table. Calix frowned. "This is irrelevant to the current situation." "On the contrary," I replied quietly, "it explains everything." I expanded the timeline. Markers appeared across the centuries. Major pandemics. Smallpox. Influenza. The Black Death. TB. Ebola. SARS. COVID. And dozens of lesser-known outbreaks. These events shaped human civilization, I explained. Every few generations, a new pathogen swept across their world. One of the Dominion scientists scoffed. "That happens to many species." "Yes," I said. "But most civilizations eventually eliminate those diseases once they develop advanced medicine." I zoomed in on the timeline. Humans had not eliminated them. Instead, they had survived them. Again and again. Each pandemic forced humanity to adapt. Their immune systems evolved. Their medical science advanced. Their societies reorganized to fight biological threats. The epidemiologist leaned forward, studying the data. "You're suggesting their species has been conditioned by disease?" "Exactly." I switched the display again. Now it showed the structure of human DNA. Several highlighted sections glowed inside the genetic sequence. "These are ancient viral remnants," I said. "Fragments of old infections embedded in their genome." The room grew quiet. "Humans carry the genetic evidence of viruses their ancestors defeated," I continued. "Their biology has spent millions of years learning how to survive infections." One of the strategists looked uneasy. "And the Cascade virus?" I brought the viral model back into view. "It behaves like the pathogens humans have been fighting for their entire evolutionary history." The realization spread slowly across the chamber. The Dominion had not created an unfamiliar threat. We had created the exact kind of challenge humanity was built to overcome. Commander Calix stared at the display for a long moment. "So their immune systems were already prepared for something like this?" "Yes. And every survivor strengthens that preparation." "Correct." The epidemiologist looked at the recovery statistics again. Millions of humans had already recovered, which meant millions of immune systems had successfully learned how to defeat the virus. And those survivors were sharing their antibodies through medical treatments across the planet. In other words, humanity was teaching itself how to defeat the Cascade virus. At an exponential rate. Calix slowly leaned back in his chair. "This was supposed to be impossible." "It still would be for most species," I said. "But humans are different." I gestured toward the timelines still floating in the air. They evolved on a world where survival required constant adaptation. A strategist spoke quietly. "If their immune systems continue improving, They will eventually become completely resistant to the virus. Silence filled the chamber. One of the junior officers finally asked the question no one wanted to voice. How long will that take? I brought up the newest projection models based on human recovery rates. The answer appeared on the screen. 30 days. Within 1 month, the majority of humanity would be immune. The Cascade virus would no longer be a weapon. It would be a failed experiment. But that was not the worst part. I turned to Commander Kellix. Humans are studying the virus now. He frowned. What do you mean? Their scientists have sequenced its genetic structure. Understanding slowly dawned in his eyes. They know it was engineered. Yes. And once they finish analyzing it, they will understand the technology used to create it. The room went completely silent. Because if humans could reverse engineer the Cascade virus, then they would eventually discover where it came from. And when that happened, the Dominion would no longer be observing humanity. Humanity would be looking for us. The moment we feared arrived sooner than anyone expected. Human scientists solved the Cascade virus in 27 days. Not only did they stop it, they completely neutralized it. Their improved antibody therapies eventually evolved into a universal treatment capable of destroying nearly every mutation the virus produced. Within weeks, hospitals around the world began reporting the same remarkable outcome. New infections were still occurring, but severe cases had almost vanished. Human immune systems now recognized the virus instantly. What had once been a civilization-ending weapon had become little more than an unpleasant illness. For the Dominion fleet observing from orbit, the implications were terrifying. Because the humans were still studying it. And the more they learned, the more obvious the truth became. The Cascade virus was artificial. Every genetic strand inside it carried evidence of deliberate engineering. By the end of the 4th week, human laboratories had fully mapped the virus's design. Which meant they understood something else as well. The technology required to build it. And technologies always have fingerprints. Human researchers traced the unusual genetic structures back through several layers of biological engineering. The patterns didn't match any natural virus in Earth's ecosystem. Eventually their analysis reached the only logical conclusion. The pathogen had been created by an advanced civilization. And that civilization had left behind clues. Fragments of alien biological coding. Manufacturing patterns. Energy signatures embedded in the viral delivery drones that had disintegrated in Earth's atmosphere. For weeks the Dominion fleet monitored human communications anxiously. Waiting. Watching. Wondering when the moment would come. It happened on the 32nd day. Our long-range sensors detected an object leaving Earth orbit. At first the Dominion officers assumed it was one of the planet's standard satellites. Then the readings changed. The object accelerated far beyond the capability of any propulsion system humans were known to possess. Within seconds it left Earth orbit entirely. Within minutes it passed the Moon. Within hours it was heading directly toward our position near Mars. Commander Kellix stared at the sensor display in disbelief. "That is impossible," he whispered. Humanity had not possessed interplanetary military ships. Not before the pandemic. But the vessel approaching us clearly wasn't a primitive spacecraft. It was sleek, and carrying advanced scanning systems. Which meant humanity had learned something else from the Cascade virus. The biological engineering techniques inside the pathogen had revealed fragments of Dominion biotechnology. Human scientists had studied those fragments, improved them, and used them to accelerate their own technological development. In less than a month, the human ship slowed as it approached the Dominion fleet. Then it did something none of us expected. It opened a communication channel. The message appeared on the command deck screen. A human woman stood at the center of the transmission. Her uniform carried the insignia of Earth's planetary defense forces. "My name is Captain Amanda Foster," she said calmly. Her voice carried none of the anger we expected. No threats. No accusations. Only quiet certainty. "We know who you are," she continued. The Dominion command crew froze. Foster glanced briefly toward something outside her camera view. Probably the Dominion fleet visible through her ship's observation window. You deployed the Cascade virus, she said. There was no point denying it. The evidence was obvious. Commander Kellex leaned forward. What is your intention? He demanded. The human captain studied him for a moment. And then she said something none of us expected. We're not here for revenge. The command chamber went silent. Foster continued speaking. Our scientists learned a great deal from your virus. She paused. More than you probably intended. Another officer stepped beside her, handing her a data tablet. She glanced at it briefly before looking back at the screen. We've reverse-engineered most of the biological technologies you used to create the Cascade virus. That alone would have been shocking enough. But then she added something even more unexpected. And we think they could be used for something much better. Commander Kellex frowned. What are you suggesting? Captain Foster's expression remained calm. We're proposing cooperation. The Dominion officers stared at the screen in disbelief. You attacked our species, Kellex said. Yes, Foster replied. And you almost wiped us out. That was not our intention. The human captain raised an eyebrow. Commander, you released a planet-wide bioweapon. He hesitated. She continued anyway. But we also know something about humanity. Her tone softened slightly. When humans survive something terrible, we try to make sure it never happens again. She leaned forward slightly. So instead of fighting you, we want to work with you. The room remained silent. Because in that moment, every Dominion officer realized the same unbelievable truth. Humanity had the power to destroy us. They understood our technology. They knew we had attacked them. And yet, they were offering peace. For a long moment after Captain Amanda Foster finished speaking, no one in the Dominion command chamber said a word. The human transmission remained open on the central display. Her expression was calm, patient, as if she were giving us time to process something that she already understood perfectly. Commander Kellex finally broke the silence. You expect us to believe this is an act of goodwill? He asked. Yes, Foster replied simply. You were the victim of an attempted extinction event. That's true. And your response is cooperation? Foster folded her hands behind her back. Commander, humans have learned something over the last few thousand years. Her voice carried the quiet confidence of someone stating an obvious fact. Revenge is easy. Several Dominion officers shifted uncomfortably. But revenge doesn't solve problems, she continued. It just creates new ones. She gestured toward the stars visible behind her through the ship's observation window. The galaxy is full of dangerous things. Deadly viruses. Hostile environments. Unpredictable species. Humanity has spent its entire history surviving threats like those. Then she looked directly into the camera. So we decided something a long time ago. If we discover something dangerous, we learn how to defeat it. She paused. And then we share that knowledge. Behind her, several human scientists were working at consoles inside the spacecraft. One of them projected a new holographic display. Dozens of unfamiliar pathogen structures appeared in the air. These are alien viruses we discovered while studying the Cascade genetic structure, Foster explained. They exist in multiple star systems. Commander Kellex frowned. You're saying the galaxy has other biological threats like this? Many, she replied. Your virus helped us identify them. The realization slowly spread through the Dominion command crew. Humanity had not only survived the Cascade virus. They had used it to detect entirely new biological dangers across the galaxy. Captain Foster continued speaking. Our proposal is simple. She activated another display. A blueprint appeared. It showed a massive research facility orbiting a neutral star system. Humans want to build a galactic biological defense network. The hologram zoomed in on the structure. Research laboratories, medical stations, genetic analysis centers, facilities large enough to house scientists from dozens of species. Instead of creating viruses, Foster said calmly, we want to learn how to stop them. She met Kellex's gaze again. And your people understand the technology better than anyone. The commander remained silent for several seconds. Then he asked the question everyone in the chamber was thinking. Why would you trust us? The human captain smiled slightly. Because humans are very good at recognizing mistakes. She leaned forward. And because we know something else. Kelix waited. You didn't destroy Earth when you had the chance. That was not the objective. Maybe, Foster said. But the Cascade virus could have been far worse. She shrugged lightly. You chose a weapon designed for study instead of immediate extermination. The Dominion officers exchanged uncertain glances. Foster continued. So we're giving you the same opportunity you gave us. To learn. Silence filled the command chamber again. Finally Kelix turned toward the Dominion Council advisors standing behind him. For the record, he said quietly, does anyone here believe we could win a war against humanity? No one answered. Because the truth had become obvious. Human immune systems had defeated the most advanced biological weapon ever created. Human scientists had reverse-engineered Dominion biotechnology in less than a month. And now they were offering something far more powerful than revenge. Partnership. Kelix looked back at the screen. You are offering us cooperation, he said slowly. Yes. Even after everything that happened. Foster nodded. Especially after everything that happened. The commander took a long breath. Then he gave the only answer that made sense. The Dominion accepts your proposal. For the first time since the transmission began, Captain Foster smiled. Good, she said. Because the galaxy is going to need all of us. 5 years later, the Interstellar Pathogen Defense Network became the largest scientific collaboration in galactic history. 47 species joined the program. More than 3,000 scientists worked together across multiple research stations. Hundreds of potential biological threats were identified and neutralized before they could spread. And every time a new species joined the network, they were told the same story. The story of the Cascade virus. The story of the greatest mistake the Velnath Dominion ever made. And the lesson humanity taught us all. Never underestimate humans. Because when you try to destroy them, they will survive. They will learn. And if you are very lucky, they will forgive you.